Do you feel the vibes?
Welcome back to the Emperor Atheist channel with your host, the Emperor Atheist. First and foremost, as I always customary do, I'd like to thank all of my subscribers, new and old. Also like to thank everyone who shares and likes my videos and comments. Likes and dislikes alike. It's okay. It's all good. So let me get right into this video. This particular video is basically dealing with Christians, particularly Christians, not actually understanding what their Bible says and what the Bible teaches. This is something that I guess we all deal with. It perplexes some people. I'm sort of used to it. I've been around it so long, and I actually have so many discussions and dialogues. Even as a Christian, when I was a Christian, I was basically came to be perplexed sometimes by the things other Christians would say about the Bible, what they thought about it, or how they interpret certain things. So basically now as an atheist, an avowed atheist I must say, and still actually studies the Bible and reads it from time to time, it perplexes me still today when I have these discussions with Christians. I particularly had a discussion this week with a Christian I won't name. Those of you who actually watched our show, our last show, Three Black Heathen show, with me, Nate, and Dragnot, y'all know who I'm talking about. But this particular Christian was said according to my cohorts that he was a learned Christian. He was a learned Christian, and this is why I tell a lot of people I like to have discussions with a lot of excuse me, not discussions, but I don't like to have a lot of debates with Christians, because most Christians, I would probably say over 75%, actually don't know the Bible and don't understand the Bible, don't understand textual criticism, don't understand biblical interpretation, and then they really don't. They're not familiar with Greek or Hebrew, syntax, thought, anything like that. So you kind of be going off into the left and right field with a lot of these people. But I do love to have debates with Christians who are learned in some of these fields, or all of these fields, whatever, or at least somewhat scholarly Christians, who can at least understand what is being said and what is being talked about. But a lot of times you run into Christians, those who even think they're learned, they really are not learned. And as we was having this discussion, I just asked a question. I asked a question, just a common sense question about Noah. Everybody knows about the story of Noah. And I was asking this particular question about Noah and how God could kill all of these children, because obviously there were people, a lot of people there, and you could kill all of these people. I said, okay, because they were doing wicked in the land. And the person basically was saying, well, since God owns the world, he can do what he wants to. Okay. All right, enough said there. But then he went on to say, I said, well, what about the babies? What about all the children that belong to these wicked people who were innocent and didn't know what was going on? What about them? All of them that got drowned in the in the flood? Well, he said, well, all of them went to heaven. He said, well, all your babies go to heaven. And I said, where did you get that from? I said, is that biblical? He said, yes, it's biblical. So I said, well, I said, that's strange. I said, well, could you please find me that verse, because I've never read that ever. All of the studies I've done in textual class and textual history class, all of the reading I've done from front to back to the Bible, I said, I've never read that. There must be an added verse just added last week or something. So he took me to the verse where Jesus was speaking to, it was Luke, it's in the book of Luke, where Jesus was speaking about, he was speaking to grown men, and he told these people, he said, unless you enter into the kingdom of heaven as children, you would not see, unless you become as little children, again, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. And he didn't understand. And we went over this particular verse 3 times, at least maybe 4 times. And I had to explain to him that this was a parable or a metaphor or symbolic gesture, as you see this a lot in the New Testament, where Jesus was particularly clearly telling grown people, unless you humble yourselves, unless you become as little children, you would not see the kingdom of heaven. But some kind of way, he actually thought this verse was talking about literal babies. But the thing is, we was talking about Noah, I was talking about God killing children. This verse that he actually went to had nothing to do with children going to heaven. So this is something that you run into. You run into people who have no idea what they're talking about. And the thing is, when you actually corner Christians in debates, they already have a sense of cognitive dissonance already on hand. But when they actually see that you have them in a particular position or corner, it gets even worse, because more and more cognitive dissonance comes out. And they start trying to scream off other verses that have nothing to do with nothing. And they go to trying to divert the conversation, adding straw mans, adding all type of logical fallacies into the discussion that is not even important to what the subject matter. So this is very important. And the reason I say it's important, because if you're going to have these discussions with Christians, you have to know exactly what you're dealing with. Most Christians who are really not learned, and I have to say this, most Christians are not really learned about the Bible and don't understand the Bible. They don't understand biblical interpretation, and they don't understand, or probably even never heard of hermeneutics. So things like this is very important for you to know. For atheists or agnostics or whoever want to deal with these particular Christians, it's important for you to know how far to go with Christians, because eventually it just becomes into a lot of chatter, trying to oust each other. And because once they kind of realize they've kind of defeated, that's all they can basically do. When they can't just use the Bible against you, then they basically just go to talking and trying to overtalk and talk about things that have nothing to do with the particular subject matter that y'all was talking about. So it's very clear in 2018 that still today, most Christians, even the learned ones, the ones who say they're learned, still don't understand the Bible, and still don't understand what Jesus, or what anybody, whoever Jesus was, what they were talking about. It's almost like the verse within the Bible. When you go to the book of John, chapter 3, when Jesus was talking to Nicodemus, and I even use this for example to the guy I was discussing with. Jesus was basically saying the same thing, almost. It's almost the same chatter. He was telling Nicodemus, who was this rich guy, who actually wanted to know, man, how can I be saved? Or how can me and my people be saved? Blah, 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 blah. And Jesus said, basically, unless a man be born again, you cannot enter into the kingdom of heaven. So Nicodemus didn't get it. Nicodemus said, well, how can a man be born again if he's old? And how can y'all enter back into my mother's womb? And he didn't understand that Jesus was speaking in the metaphors. The Bible is full of these BS metaphors and metaphorical things. A lot of ancient writings are full of metaphors and symbolic gestures. But Nicodemus, to me, today represents probably 85% of the Christian world. They still read the Bible with a blind eye, with a tunnel vision, and don't actually understand that these things are really not real. Not only the metaphors and the symbolic gestures of this so-called character Jesus was speaking, but the Bible as a whole. The story of Noah, Jonah in the whale, Daniel in the lion's den, Jesus walking on water. All of these things, and it's kind of contradictory for Christians to read this book and not see that these things are not real. These things is not reality. And the writers of these books are writing these things as myth. The Bible, the whole from Genesis to Revelation, the Bible is what we call an etiological myth. Etiological coming from the term etiology. Etiology means something to try to explain origin. When you're dealing with the book of Genesis, basically, you're dealing with something that's trying to explain how we got here. Because this is the questions of our ancestors. How did we get here? Because they didn't understand how we got here. So they just created stories. Not just the people who wrote Genesis in the Bible, but the Indians, the ancient Aztecs, the Persians, Muslims, everybody had them, ancient Africans, a whole 12,000 square mile continent, Asians. Everybody was trying to figure out, how do we get here? So science has basically been closing that gap now. 2018, but we still have these religious people who still believe in these archaic mythological books. As I said again, it's an etiological myth. A myth, a story that is mythical in nature, all the way in nature, that is just trying to explain how we got here. What we are, what is our purpose. So basically, I just wanted to drop this video to let y'all know to be careful in treading discussions with certain Christians, and when you have these discussions, because a lot of times it's not worth having a debate with certain Christians, but when you're having these discussions or dialogues, just be careful, and basically just watch how far it's going, and be able to recognize the logical fallacies when they start shooting them at you. Most of the time, they're going to straw man you, which is basically the number one logical fallacy used by everyone. And that's basically what they're going to do. They're going to straw man you, try to divert, the subject matter when they feel like you have them cornered. But just avoid it. Be conscious of it. Just wait on it because it's going to come. Once again, I'm Emperor Atheist. I am out. Peace.